Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, and assembled company, wherever you are in this world and whatever time it is, good day and welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe and Connecting the World by Story, our Monday magazine program. And tonight we're going around the world with Cinderella. And we're going to start way down under in Australia with a story from Jo Hemwood. She's pre-recorded it on account of the fact that it's 3 o'clock in the morning in Oz at the moment. So, we didn't want to wake her up. So, Julio, let it roll.
She was born in ash and breathed in dust.
Nothing happening with me. Can't hear nothing. Pretty pictures, no sound. Yep, I've got a piano.
Left to her. Around that piano for them to sing and rehearse for the local talent competitions that they went to in the Jeep. They never won. The news came one day, not on the radio, sitting on a dusty shelf, never listened to, but no, on the never silent TV that took up pride of place in the house. And the news was that Opera Australia was bringing opera in the outback right to their very district. And best of all, they were going to have local singers in the chorus. Well, the stepsisters were filled with delight. Surely they should be chosen to sing in a national opera company. Oh, by sunset they were ready, all gathered out in all their glad rags, ready to go off into the Jeep, into the four-wheel drive, into town to take their place. And as for Cinderella, well, she couldn't go. No, she had to stay behind in case there's another bushfire. A plume of dust followed the Jeep as the three women left, leaving Cinderella alone. She wandered down to the creek bed, the creek bed that had been dry since the death of her mother. And there she began to weep, crying and calling out, oh, how I wish that I could sing in the opera. And as her tears fell, they filled that once empty creek with water, with light, rising up and bringing freshness and life to what had been barren. And as the sound of water spread, so too did the sound from that once silent radio. Well then, if it is your wish to sing, you shall sing. All you need to do is catch a fly. A fly from the veranda. And then in this now watery creek, catch a dragonfly. And in her other hand, Cinderella reached down into the rich warm waters of the creek and caught in her hand a dragonfly, which grew and grew until it became a helicopter. And the pilot, the fly, the pilot ready to hand her up into the helicopter to take her away to the opera, dressed in, oh no, there doesn't seem to be an image for the dress that Cinderella was wearing. So I'm afraid it's going to have to be up to you to imagine the most beautiful dress in the world. And with that, she made her way to where the opera in the outback was gathered. And she made her way into the chorus amongst all those other singers from around the world, where Wu Li, the premier tenor from the opera house, was ready to sing. And he listened and he sang. And as he sang, her voice came forward. And her voice joined his. And together, the other voices faded so that Wu Li and Cinderella could sing together. But as he turned to look at the conductor to join in his pleasure for this voice, Cinderella realised that everyone was looking at her, her stepmother, her stepsisters, and she fled. She fled away. Back. But Wu Li was not going to let such a voice, such a woman flee from him. And a great announcement went out that there would be a competition to find the voice that he had heard on that one night. They would go out and have phone calls to all the stations in the district to listen to those who could sing, to match that voice to his never-fading memory of the voice he had heard that night, Cinderella's voice. The sisters were filled with joy. This was their great chance to break out, for their voices to be heard. But they had to do something. They had to make their voice the best in the land. And so when Louis phoned them, they augmented reality, as they had done so many times with their own bodies. And they played some random pieces from the record collection of Cinderella's mother. How could they guess that the premier tenor of Opera Australia would actually recognise those voices? And Cinderella had no need for anyone's voice but her own. And she sang out her own song into the radio. And she sang a song of longing for music and for Wu Li. A love song. And when he heard that song of longing, Wu Li knew, I know that voice. I want that voice. I love that voice. And with that, Cinderella was drawn forth through the radio to join him at his side, and he carried her away to his own pearly palace by the water. And there they made beautiful music together forevermore, and lived in beauty, in music, and love happily ever after.
Whoa. That one, whoa. Ah, the magic of Zoom and the internet and everything else. We missed the first few lines of that story, but I'm sure we can guess what they were. Now, before the magic of Zoom disappears in Austin, Texas, because it's a bit windy down there, and their Zoom has become a little unstable. So David Thompson down in Austin is going to take us all the way back to one of the earliest, possibly the earliest Cinderella story from ancient Egypt. Mike, are you ready?
Yes, are you ready?
Yeah, you're a bit crackly, but we'll given the circumstances, you will be forgiven for all things.
Oh, you're so kind. I'm ready.
Yeah, please go.
Okay. Hi, everybody. David Thompson here in Austin, Texas. The story I'm going to tell you is being considered, and I use air quotes because it depends on with whom you speak, is the oldest Cinderella story. It was written down in the 1st century BCE by Strabo, the Roman historian, and it's very dry. So I've taken the story, and this is my adaptation of it. This is Rhodopis. And in that time, when Egypt had the great civilization, and in that time, when the Pharaoh of Upper and Lower Egypt ruled with a firm yet just hand, there was a young Greek slave, Rhodopis, beautiful that she was, for she had been stolen by pirates and sold in the slave markets. Well, a kindly older gentleman decided to buy her to keep her from unjust masters. Now, the servants in the old man's house, his name was Nafu. In his house, the servants made fun of her, for their hair, the servants' hair, was long and black and luxurious. Their eyes were the dark brown of the sands, and their skin was the color of bronze. Rhodopis had eyes as green as the Nile, short, red, gold curly hair, and skin so fair that she burned unbearably. So the servants, who were hired as slaves, decided that if she would have all the worst tasks, clean the linen, bake the bread, sweep the colonnade, feed the animals. And so Rhodopis did as she was told. But she loved washing the clothes, because she would go down to the river and she would wash them and beat them on the rocks to keep them clean. And while she was doing that, she would sing, and the birds came to listen to her. Oh, she even had a monkey that would come and chatter around and sit on her shoulder. But my friends, for my friends you are, there was an old female hippo that would come driving up through the waters and relax in the mud and listen to her sing. And it would snort in appreciation, and sometimes it would yawn its huge jaws in a strange type of a smile. And Rhodopis, these were her friends. And when she finished washing, she would dance. And oh, she would dance to where her feet almost didn't touch the ground. Now, little did Rhodopis know that the master would take a nap under a tree not too far from where she was, for he did appreciate her beauty. And she did not know that the hippopotamus, the old female hippo friend, was actually the Egyptian goddess Tauret, goddess of protection, birth, and child divinity. She did not know these, so she continued her chores. And when the man, the masters at Nefu, woke one time to see her dancing, he knew that he must give her some special sandals, for she should not tear up her feet. And so he bought her sandals that were decorated with rosy gold. And she was very, very proud of those sandals. Then again, the servants didn't care for it because he was showing favoritism to a slave of all things. Little did Rhodopis know that Tauret, the old friendly hippopotamus, had spoken to her brother god, Horus, the Eye of Ra, and they together decided to help her. So one day when Rhodopis was down washing the linens and singing and the birds were twittering and her monkey friend was chattering all around, the hippopotamus splooshed water to where it went up over Rhodopis and soaked her totally, and also soaked her sandals, the beautiful rose sandals that her master had given her. So she took them off and put them in the sun to dry. And while she was continuing washing, Horus, in the shape of a falcon, came down and took off with one of the sandals. What was she to do? She grabbed the other sandal to keep it from being taken also, and she hid it in her tunic. And she continued her duties. Life went on day after day, week after week, month after month. The Nile rose and fell, rose and fell. And each day Rhodopis would sing and clean the linens, and the monkey and the birds and the friendly hippopotamus would come. Well, word got out that the Pharaoh Amasis, great as he who rules Upper and Lower Egypt, was coming to Memphis, where Rhodopis lived. And it was also said that the Pharaoh, just and firm that he is, wished to see all of his subjects and declared a great feast, and everyone from the highest to the lowest was invited. The servants were all excited, and they got their best linen out, and they oiled their hair and their face. But they gave a lot more tasks to Rhodopis, so she could not go. And so the master, the servants, all went to the great feast, leaving Rhodopis at home. Well, she went down to the river, and while she was beating the linen and singing the songs, beat the linen, clean the linen, beat the linen, clean the linen, she had an epiphany. For Tauret, the great hippo, came up, and in her own voice, as hippos speak, you are to go. Do not be afraid. They will come for you. At the feast with the Pharaoh, the great ruler of Upper and Lower Egypt, there was great feasting and dancing, and people were singing, and there were court magicians, and the Pharaoh was bored. He would much rather be out in the desert in his chariot. And as everyone was partying and having a grand time, a falcon flew in and dropped a golden sandal in the Pharaoh's lap. Oh, people were amazed and they bowed low, for surely this was a sign from the great Ra himself. And the Pharaoh decreed that whoever foot could fit this sandal would be his wife, for they knew that he was looking for a wife. So every woman at the feast tried as she wanted, did not fit. he sent out town criers for all the villages to come. And the shoe did not fit any woman. Huh. But the master said, there is one in my home, I will go get her. Rhodopis arrived, and she bowed low before the great Pharaoh, the ruler of Upper and Lower Egypt. And the vizier came, and her foot fit. It fit the sandal. And the Pharaoh rose, and everyone bowed low. And the Pharaoh said, this woman shall be my queen. And there was a great outcry, but she is not Egyptian. And the Pharaoh looked stern and just as he was, and said, truly, she is more Egypt than you, for her hair is as the red gold of the great god Aten as he rises in the sun, and her eyes are as green as the Nile, and her skin is like the lotus flower. And so they were married. And so Rhodopis, before she left, went down to the bank to say goodbye to her friends the birds, to say goodbye to her friend the monkey. And as she was turning to leave, the great hippo, who was Tauret, the goddess of protection, love, and divinity of childhood, lumbered up out of the water and opened its mouth. And the voice came, you are protected. Go in peace and love, for we will always watch over you. And Rhodopis turned just in time to see the hippo and the falcon slowly make their way up the Nile. And that is how Rhodopis became queen of Egypt.
Thank you, David. Brilliant. And for those of us old enough to remember long playing records, which even when they got crackly, we'd still play them because the music was there. And David, your music was there despite the crackle. Marvelous. Thank you very much. Brilliant. I love that story. And it kind of, you know, I always thought the small feet came from because the Chinese version of 600 AD that was collected in 600 AD. I thought, well, that makes sense because of how, you know, the traditionally small feet and binding of feet in. So I always thought that the glass slip and all the feet stuff came from that one, but this is even older. Your version is an even older version, and the slippers in there. But right now we're going to an entirely different country. There's only two people on this Zoom that I've actually met in real life. One's Jan Williams up in one corner, and she's down in Essex in England. But about 5 years ago now, I'd just had a stroke, and or I'd had a stroke a few months before, and someone thought it'd be a really good idea to take me down to Marrakesh, which I hadn't been to since 1968, and to convalesce. And I hadn't actually. I'd done one very small storytelling, but there'd been, but I hadn't done any more. And I went. So they took me down to Cafe Clock in the Casbah in Marrakesh, and there was it was wonderful. There was an old storyteller there who had been a storyteller on the square, and who got fed up with Ben Haj, who got fed up with the commercialization of the square, too many monkeys on chains and belly dancers, but he was concerned that the tradition should be carried on the storytelling in Morocco is at least a 4,000-year-old tradition, and so I was taken down to the Cafe Clock, and I told a story there for the first time really since my stroke, and but the best bit for me was just sitting in the corner and swapping stories with, you know, two old grey-haired geezers in the corner, swapping stories. And then at the end they all sang a song, and he said, well, someone translated what he was saying for me and just said, well, I bet you don't know what the words meant, and the words were, just because I've got this grey hair, you didn't think I could dance like this. And so it's a real high point. And one of the people there is our storyteller, who's going to give us a Moroccan version of Cinderella. Zuha, big round of applause for Zuha.
Thank you. I hope that I am well heard and well seen.
You are indeed.
Perfect. So yeah, I didn't get the last sentences that you said. I got monkeys with diapers and belly dancers, which is true, which is the sad truth of the square. It's not a place of storytelling as it was for thousands of years, but it's just a place for just loud music and food. Well, let me tell you a Cinderella story from Morocco right now. We have different versions of Cinderella. We have the Jewish one and the Amazigh one of the local people. And now I'm going to tell you the Amazigh one and the old one. ولا في عدا يفدا إلا في التكبير وفي التهليل والصلاة والسلام على البشير المنير ضلته الغمامة سيدي محمد عريس القيامة. يحكى يا سيادي وسادتي والله أعلم وقضى وأحكم أنه كان في قديم الزمان وسال في العصر والأوان. This is the Moroccan version of Once Upon a Time. It's very long. So once upon a time, there lived an orphan. Her name is Aisha. Aisha lost her mother when she was 4, and she grew up with her father, who married. So she was raised by her stepmother, an evil woman. She always mistreated her. She always considered her as a servant, not just a daughter. So Aisha was a girl of great beauty that was covered with layers of sadness, dirt, tiredness of the kitchen, and all the tiring work that she's been doing, getting water from the river, washing the whole house, cleaning, cooking, and doing a lot of stuff. On the other hand, and the other side of the house, there lived her stepsister. This stepsister, she is always spending time taking care of herself, sleeping all day, just asking things from Aisha. Aisha, bring me water, bring me food, bring me this, do this to me. I want to take a bath, comb my hair, all different stuff. Days and years passed, and one day, Aisha was roaming around the forest, gathering some dead wood so she can take it to the house and she can boil the water and prepare a nice hot bath for her sister. And all of a sudden she saw the Sultan, so young and so handsome on his horse. He's just riding his horse around the forest. She fell in love with what she saw. The Sultan is so handsome. But she could not approach because she thought, who am I to go there and say hi to a sultan? Look at him, so clean, and they am so dirty, and they have this old, torn, dirty jalaba on me. I cannot go there. So she went back to her sister, prepared the bath. A week later on, the sultan decided to do something amazing for his people. As he was single, so was a lot of other youngsters in his kingdom. So he decided to throw a feast for 7 days and 7 nights. This is how Moroccans used to celebrate back then. So for 7 days and 7 nights, he will prepare food, music, and it's a chance for young men and women to meet up and make matches. I mean, if they want, they can marry, and then The king will also pick from the girls that he will invite to his feast. So he will pick a wife for him from there. So every girl got so excited. Everyone was talking about that feast. Everyone was preparing. Even poor families would borrow money in order to prepare their young children to get married and buy beautiful clothes for them and make them look decent for the feast. But Aisha, of course, as in every story, was not allowed to go. She was to stay in the house and prepare the house. So her stepmother told her that you will stay in the house. I mean, clean the whole house, make it beautiful, make it beautiful, because I'm sure my daughter is she's the most beautiful girl in the city. So I'm sure that the sultan or a nobleman will come and ask for her hand and propose. So I want the house to be good. I want you to prepare sweets. I want you to prepare food. So you cannot come with us to the feast. She kept crying and begging, but in vain. The stepmother, the evil stepmother, insisted that she does not want her to go. So everyone gathered in that feast. And Aisha was the only young person who stayed in the village. So for 7 days and 7 nights, she was doing her duties, crying, and she was feeling miserable. I mean, I want to go there. All the servants went to that feast, but I am here, hidden under this kitchen. So one day, she decided to go to the river and get some water so she can wash the whole house. So she was there, putting the bottles of water inside the river and picking them up, and she was crying. Then there was a fish, a golden fish, approach her. And then Aisha picked that golden fish and she was like moving in her hand and she was speaking to her. The fish spoke to Aisha in a way that every human will understand. She told her, "Let me go and there will be a mother to you. Let me go and there will be a mother to you." She kept repeating the same sentence until Aisha decided to put her back in water. Then, as soon as the fish touched the water, she changed her shape, and she became in the shape of a human and the shape of her mother. And she told her, "I want you to tell me whatever wish you have, and they will make it true." Then she told her, "Well, I want to go to the feast, but if my stepmother find me there, it will not be a happy day for me." Then she told her, "Well, I gather that you want to go and see a handsome suitor." She told her, "Yes, I really fancy the sultan, the king, and I really want to be close to him." Then she gave her a Moroccan balga. If you know what is a balga, it's Moroccan slipper, but we go with them outside. So she gave her a slipper, and she told her, "Go and hide yourself with the palace servants, and I want you to put this balga wherever the sultan can find it." That's what she did. She sneaked into the palace. She put the balga somewhere that the sultan will find out. Then she left to her house and she kept doing her daily things. Then, when the feast was over and everyone got his match, but the sultan did not really like anyone. No girl really attracted his attention. And when he was going back to his chambers, he saw that slipper decorated with gold and diamonds and with very fancy leather. He really loved that slipper. And he said, "Well, someone with a taste like this, someone who would make a balgha or wear a balgha like this, must be someone who is very beautiful." So he called for his servants, "Your Majesty," and he told them, "Send the barah." The barah back then is someone who will carry the news from the royal palace, from the royal court, and roam around the city shouting the news. So he told, to his barrack, go with some of the guards, and I want you to make every girl in this village try this slipper. And that's what they did. Every girl tried it, but it did not fit any of the girls. Either it's too big or too small. And they reached the house of Aisha. It was the last house. Aisha, of course, was not allowed to try that slipper because her stepmother, knew that she was not in the feast. So why she would bother trying that slipper? So her sister tried it, but it was too big for her. Then they left, but they kept asking around the village, is there any other girl? They told them that there is a girl named Aisha, but she did not go to the feast. She was in the kitchen. She was just in the house. She's dirty, so maybe it's not the girl you were trying to find. The Sultan was informed about this, and he was really sad. But he kept asking, "Are you really sure that no girl's feet fit up this slippers?" They said, "No, we tried every girl's feet in the village, but no girl was the one." There was one girl that we did not really ask. Her name is Aisha, but she is just a servant, and she was not in the feast. But the king told them, "Well, I insist, just go and try it." They went, and this time Aisha was the one that they were trying to find. But like everyone find it hard to believe that this girl that is really dirty, wearing these dirty clothes, is the one owning those slippers. So they went back to the king, to the sultan, with this news. The sultan got really hyped and excited because he knew that there is something behind that girl. So he picked some gold and silver, fancy fabrics, and he went to her house so he can propose from her father. Her stepmother got the news, and she decided to do something about it. So she locked Aisha inside the kitchen, and she took off her clothes, and she made her own daughter look like Aisha. So when the king came, he told her, "Well, are you Aisha?" "Yes, your majesty." Then he told her, "Well, if you allow me, I want to love you. I want you to be my queen." She said, "I do accept." But here the king really felt something suspicious. And then he asked, "Well, if you please, I want to try these slippers on you just to make sure. I want to do it by my own hands." He, he tried to fit the slippers into her feet, but again, the slippers were too big. Then he asked her mother, "Where is Aisha?" "Oh, well, this is Aisha. My daughter left." But then the king kept insisting on saying Aisha until her father heard this, and he really wanted to do something nice for his daughter. Then he went and he unlocked Aisha from the kitchen, and he gave her a decent piece of fabric, and he told her, "Go and see the king. He is asking for you." Aisha went. She was so dirty with messed up hair. Then, "Your majesty, I am Aisha." Then he told her, "Come closer." And he put the slippers into her feet. And guess what? The slippers fit perfectly. And the king decided to marry Aisha, and Aisha was the queen of the Sultan. وعاشوا في أمان واستمنان حتى أتاهم مهزم الذات ومفرق الجماعات وصلى الله عليه وسلم. In English, they lived happily ever after until the end of time. And this is the end of my story. Thank you so much.
I love the commonality of stories around the world. It just, we are, the human race has been moving round, and swapping stories forever. We're now going to go and thank you for that, Suha. It was brilliant. I loved it. And Sarah Lloyd Winder, we're going from South Mims up the A1 to Scotland, and you're going to tell us your Hertfordshire version of a Scots story. Are we ready, Sarah? Over to you.
I hope we can hear me. Oh, yes.
We can hear you. Yeah.
It's not as far-fetched as you think, you see. This comes from my grandmother and her family, because my great-great-grandmother was an Orcadian, which is where the story comes from. And when I was little, I was told a version of this story. And it's not quite the story that's written down and repeated by everybody, but I will try and do a nice little merge. The story is called Ashipattle and the Storeworm. When a farmer had a seventh son, all the magic and mystery and folklore that goes with the seventh son, and they expected a bouncing baby boy who was strong and tough and would go out and do the farming. And they got a little boy who was thin and weedy and quite a bit of a daydreamer. In fact, a big daydreamer. In fact, he was absolutely useless at everything. He'd be doing something in the fields and he'd turn and see something really vital and important down in the corner, and any animal he was supposed to be looking after had gone. He'd be sent to cut something and he'd forget. Clouds go like that. So after a while, the family, they started to dismiss him. You're useless at farming. We don't know what to do with you. Stay at home. Then you're safer. And then it was, you're useless at home. Get in the fireplace and clean up. You're useless at everything. And they used to laugh that all he was good for was cleaning the ashes. So they'd call him Ashipattle, the ashy boy. Because even when he was cleaning up the ashes and making sure, because it was vital, that the fire was lit every single day and was alight all the time, he would forget, or he would dream, or worst of all, he'd start making pictures in the ash with a stick. But there was one person who thought he was great, his little sister, because he told her stories that he made up about everything, about the birds, about fighting, about ships. He was brilliant at stories, useless at most jobs. But then one day his little sister was taken to the royal palace to be a servant. And then there was nobody to tell stories to anymore. But suddenly, on the island of Orkney, well, there were lots of islands in Orkney, but on this one certain island of Orkney, there was a terrible, terrible trouble. A giant fish had appeared over the skyline. Not only was it giant, but it had the worst breath of anything that anybody had ever smelt. I mean, there are many monsters around the world, but I can't remember many monsters who open their mouths and sheep fall down in a faint. Crops fall over, trees wave, because the storeworm was so stinky of breath. Well, not only was the storeworm stinky of breath, but it was greedy of stomach. And if it could get up to the shore, it would eat everything. If boats went out to fish, it would eat the boats. If people came near the shore, it would lick them up. Well, of course, you can't have things like that. And so a petition was sent to the king. He must do something. The king didn't know what to do. What do you do? I don't know what to do. We'll fight him. So the soldiers went to the shore. Well, they had to wear pegs on their noses because it was so smelly. And they were useless. As soon as they got near the edge of the water, the storeworm just stuck out its tongue and ate them. Nobody knew what to do. At the king's palace, though, there was a wizard. The wizard had been waiting for some time for something to happen so he could put his wizardy ideas in place. And he said, a virgin is needed. A virgin is needed to feed the storeworm, and then it will go away. And so influential did the wizard become that people started nodding. Well, they were desperate anyway. Wouldn't you visit virgin? Virgin will make so much difference. And then the wizard went a step further. Not just a virgin, king's daughter. A king's daughter? Yes. And so desperate had become the situation that the islanders just thought, oh yeah, stick the king's daughter up, virgin, on a stick. Storeworm will come, eat the daughter and run away. Well, do you know, in strange times, strange things seem possible. Like curing yourself by drinking bleach. It seemed possible to stick a virgin on a stake near the water's edge would solve all their problems. Meanwhile, at home, with little Aschenputtel, he heard, they're going to stick a princess at the edge of the sea? Don't think that's going to work. But all his family said, what would you know? You don't know anything. You're just a boy who sweeps ashes. I thought, I know that won't work. That's not how stories work. You have to have a knight. Well, the king had thought that too. You have to have a knight that comes and battles. So he put out a proclamation. I will give my daughter's hand in marriage if you can kill the storeworm so she won't have to be sacrificed. And lots of men came. They thought they were big and brave and strong, and they stood there on the side by the water's edge, and first they smelt, and they stepped many paces back, and then they saw the tongue come out towards them, and they ran. And soon there were no knights. And the poor king, beleaguered, everybody listening to his wizard, he thought, I will have to fight. I have a sword that I used in my youth, a sword that is supposed to have come from Odin. I don't know how I got it, but I got it. I will go, even though I'm quite old now. Meanwhile, Aschenputtel thought, I will go. All these brave ones, they couldn't do it, but I who think and tell stories, I could solve this problem. His family would not listen. Then one night, just before they were going to put the princess out, he heard his mother and father talking about the magic horse they had and how the horse they had was so speedy it could go overnight to the coast. All you had to do is twist an ear and whisper. Well, of course, decided this would be useful, and for the morning we will go and watch the king's daughter being eaten. But Aschenputtel, he thought, I could get to the sea if I did that. I could get and save her. So as soon as his parents were asleep, he crept out and he got on the horse and he used the magic that he heard his parents talking about and he raced to the coast. Now, remember, he is a small boy. He is not a giant man. And he has come to the coast with nothing. So he has to use his brains and his imagination. So he goes to a house. He asks the lady for a big pot. She looks at him and, what do you want your big pot for? I'm going to kill the storeworm. Now somehow she thought he was completely mad, but it was worth a try. So she gave him the pot, and then he said, can I take some peat? Peat that burns for hours and hours. Peat that will keep me warm. Well, she'd given him the pot. She may as well lend him some peat. And So he put the peat in the pot and he crept down to the seashore. At the same time, the king, he was thinking he would go and he would kill the storeworm in the night. And he'd gone down to the beach and he told his men to prepare a boat so that he could row out. When Ashenputtel got there, he saw the boat. He didn't see the king. And he tricked the man guarding the boat. He said, "Oh, the king says go back at the beach. He wants you to help him." When the man went back up the beach, Ashenputtel leapt in the boat and rowed out. Now the storeworm, that giant smelly beast, had his mouth closed, thank goodness. But he was snoring, and the snores rocketed round the bay like thunder. And just as Ashenputtel got near, the storeworm opened its mouth. A big yawn! Pulled in the little boat right inside. In went little Ashenputtel in his tiny boat, deeper and deeper into the stomach of the giant storeworm, till he got to the place inside the stomach where the liver was. And if you know anything about livers and big fish, you know that they used to use the oil to burn lamps. So the boy, in his cleverness, took out the burning peat, threw it at the liver, and at once it started to smoulder and burn. And the smell, oh, it was horrible. And the feeling in that poor stoneworm's stomach must have been horrible, because he was alight from the inside. And he did another great big yawn and he spat out the little boat and the boy with his cauldron. And the boy rolled back to the shore as fast as possible and leapt ashore. And he watched as the storeworm burnt from inside, tossing and turning and flicking, and it is said that his teeth dropped out and made all the little islands in the archipelago. The flipping of his tail made Norway and Sweden and the division. Became the star of Iceland. Would you believe it? When Ashenputtel, he took the pot back to the lady. He didn't forget that. He was a good boy. And the king saw what had happened and said, you are the most amazing person. You have solved all our problems. You must marry my daughter. At the same point, news came to the king that the wizard was racing away, was trying to escape. The wizard who had said that the king must sacrifice his daughter. So little Ashenputtel suddenly saw his most knightly and storytelling thoughts. And he thought, I must fight the wizard. King, I must take your sword. And without the king realizing what was happening, he took the magic sword, he got back on the magic horse, and he rode and he killed the wizard and came back. Now, of course, at the end of every Cinderella story, the prince must marry the princess. The Ashenputtel must marry the princess. But in my story, because I was told it when I was very little, for some reason my grandmother decided that Ashenputtel wouldn't marry the princess until they decided it was a good idea. I think she was trying to teach me a lesson. So in my story, they were great friends, and they decided that if they wanted to marry when they were grown up, they would. But until then, they would live and learn. And do you know what the best bit for Ashenputtel was? He got an education, which is what he needed all along. And that is my strange version of Ashenputtel and the Storeworm. Thank you very much. Ba-dum.
Thank you, Sarah. Now, I think I'm going to finish with one of my favourite Cinderella stories. It's called Cinder Girl, and it was recorded by John Sampson. It's a Welsh gypsy version, and it's kind of the after story, because there just has to be something happen. And it starts conventionally enough. There are three sisters, well, two sisters and a stepsister, Cinder Girl. And every Sunday, the two sisters went off to church, because the only way in those days you could meet a young man was by going to church on Sunday and just making eyes to each other across the pew. But every Sunday when they went to church, they'd lock Cinder Girl in the coal cellar. And one day they come back from church, and the talk of the whole town is a prince had started coming to church, and he was amazing, he was fantastic, he was gorgeous. And Cinder Girl thinking, I wish I could go and see him, but of course she was locked in a coal cellar. But the next Sunday, the coal cellar, while the sisters are at church, the coal cellar is undone. There's a little old lady. Would you like to go to church, would you? Yes, yes, yes. Well, go out to the yard and take a white stone, roll it across the yard at a rock on the far side. It'll open, it'll become a cave. Go in, the cave will be full of dresses. Choose your own dress, because, you know, I mean, I know in most of the Cinderella stories, she gets her dress given to her, but Janet, do you like to choose your own dresses? Yeah, I'm Jan. You know, would you trust someone else to go and get your clothes for you? Well, no. So, well, it's just, there are racks. There are going to be racks, and then when you've got your dresses and your slippers and stuff, just roll that stone again, and there'll be another opening, and there inside will be a stable, and there'll be a pony, and it's got to have a beautiful jeweled saddle and bridle, and go to church, but leave just before the end and come back and put everything back. And of course, everything happened exactly as the old woman said. Well, no one recognized it. And they'd come back, and of course she was back in her cellar by this time, and the cellar was all locked. And they were going, the most beautiful girl, we don't stand a chance, the most beautiful, fantastic girl has been at church. Anyway, this went on for a few weeks, and eventually the old woman says, this time, wait till very near the end, but run out, and on your way out, drop the slipper, because who believes? It's like in Zuhar's story. I mean, in Zuhar's story, she put the slipper there. I mean, no one in their right mind believes that Cinderella accidentally dropped the slipper. So there's drop the slipper on the way out, and that's exactly what she did. Well, of course, the prince finds the slipper, and of course he gets everyone there, and they have to try it on, and the sisters, you know, they cut off their toes and heels to make the slipper fit. But even the most stupid prince would notice if there was blood seeping through the slipper. And eventually they said, well, there must be someone else. Well, like in all the Cinderella stories, they said, well, there's just Cinder Girl. And they brought, well, of course it fitted perfectly. And of course there was a great wedding. But who believes the sisters gave up there? No. Well, Princey boy, in the way of princes then, you know, I mean, so she's going to have her first child, but princes didn't hang around there. There was no sort of going to the hospital to watch the birth. It was, you know, he just went out hunting or wars or whatever princes did then. And he said, so he got one of the sisters, and he said, can you stay and can you be the midwife? Well, Cinder Girl gave birth to a beautiful daughter. And as soon as it was born, her stepsister swapped it for a puppy. Prince God, my wife has had a puppy. That's no sort of why. I said, yeah, and that's terrible, said the sister. Yeah. She said, please forgive me, I'll do better next time. Well, next time came, he was away hunting. He didn't think to hang about and watch. This time, there's a baby boy. And again, it's swapped with the puppy. When the prince gets cut, they say, you've got to burn your wife. She's a witch. She keeps giving birth to puppies. Oh, give me one more chance. I promise I'll have a proper baby this time. Well, third time, he's away hunting. You know, some men never actually learn. And of course, there's another baby boy, and of course, who swapped for a puppy. Well, this time he said, I've got no choice. I'm going to have to burn you at the stake. But I'm soft-hearted, so I can't watch. So I'll leave the servants to do it. Well, she's put the stake, and she's you can't do this. When who passed by? The little old lady. Stop that, said the little old lady. Well, the servants might have been afraid of a prince, but they were even more afraid of the little old lady. And so, of course, they let her go. And little old lady said, you're not quite out of the woods yet. In fact, that's exactly where you're going, because you're going to turn into a sow and you're going to walk around the forest. And the prince is going to hear about you, and he's going to come out with you with his huntsman, and he's going to kill you. She's not very happy about this, but and then he's going to cut you open. He's going to take your liver, and he's going to nail it to the gate of the palace. No, trusted a little old lady, so and the little old lady said, "Don't worry, it'll work out. You know, all you've got to do is, if anyone wants anything, they've just got to take a sliver of liver down by the river and say these certain words, and they can have whatever they want." Well, sure enough, she turned into a sow, and she's going through the woods, and she meets three children. She meets her children. They said, the sow said, children, and they talking sow. Don't be afraid. I'm your mum. Well, and they said, don't worry. The prince is going to come and kill me, and he's going to cut out my liver, and he's going to hammer it onto nail it to the palace gate, and take you know, if you want anything, just take a sliver of liver down by the river, say these certain words, and you can have whatever you want. Well, sure enough, the prince had heard about the sow in the forest, and he came out with his hunting party, and he killed the sow, and he took the liver, and he nailed it to the palace wall. Well, a few days later, the children were sitting down by the stream, and we've all done it. We've all looked at somewhere and thinking, wouldn't it be nice if we lived there? And they were looking at the meadow on the other side of the stream. Wouldn't it be beautiful? Wouldn't it be really good if we had a lovely cottage? Because they were a bit feral at that time, because of course they'd been taken to the forest to be looked after by the grandmother, and she had died, and they'd just been left to run free. And the girl had done her best, and she'd looked after them well enough, but you know, a nice little cottage would do. And the sister said, I think I can sort that out. And she went and got a sliver of liver down by the river, said the certain words, and there was a most beautiful cottage. Well, a stranger came by and knocked on the door, asking for a drink, and sister wasn't very happy about it, but can't turn a stranger away. So she made him hot drink. Now, the children happened to be wearing golden belts. And when the stranger went, he went back to the prince. He said, the strangest thing happened in the forest. I'd never seen this cottage before. It was in a meadow next to the forest, next to the stream. And there was 3 children. They had the most beautiful golden belts. Bring them to me, said the prince. Bring me the belts, said the prince. Well, the old man went back to the cottage. And of course, he asked to see the belts, and the boys, being boys, just wanted to show off. They handed them. But the girl wouldn't. Girl had a bit more sense. And as soon as the old man was gone, the boys turned into swans. And they're going up the river. And actually, the sister was, she thought, I've got a bit of peace and quiet, but eventually she thought, I'd like my brothers back. So she went and she got a sliver of liver down by the river, said the certain words, she had her brothers back again. Now, you'd think they'd get to this conclusion faster, but they said, but wouldn't it be nice if Mum was here? I think I can organise that sliver of liver down by the river. There was Mum. Whoa. They're looking at each other, and Mum said, well, we could go and tell the prince it was all a big mistake. Now, why she wanted to go, well, maybe it's to do with the fact he had a palace, but why she wanted to go back to him, I don't know. But she said, but if I turn up and just say, no, I didn't have puppies after all, these are my children, he won't believe me. But I take a slipper of liver down by the river, say these words. Suddenly, there's Princey Boy having a cup of tea back at the palace, and suddenly he finds himself back in the middle of the forest, and he's told the whole story. And of course, he takes his family back to the palace. And as far as I know, they live there for the rest of their lives, happily ever after. And so, yeah, I just love that because it just is. Apart from the most appalling story, it is the after story. So thank you very much, Zuha, Joe in Australia, David. You probably had to go because your internet gave up and you're all together, or your Zoom gave up. Sarah, you're getting ready to go. You're getting your bag and you're hanging on to the end of the story. It's great. A bag, coat, everything, about to run. And Key and the whole business. Get a round of applause for everybody. And thank you, Yuliu, for bearing with us all this time, and Sat Mike for coming in and watching us, and everyone else, Janet and everyone. Bye, and we'll see you sometime through the World Storytelling Cafe. Thank you very much.